Oh, Virgo, it's Anna, from Virgo. And I need you to sit with me for this one. Really sit with me because what is coming through today is not something I take lightly, and it is not something I want you to take lightly either. There are readings that feel routine, there are readings that feel significant. And then there are readings like this one where something comes through that stops you mid thought and makes you want to choose every word carefully because what is being described is rare in the truest sense of the word. Not rare like uncommon, rare like once. Like the kind of thing that most people spend their entire lives either searching for or not quite believing exists. So I want you to be here fully, not half distracted, not half somewhere else, here. Because this is the kind of message that deserves your full presence. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. And if something in you already knows what I am about to say, subscribe because there is so much more of this waiting for you. Let's go slowly with this one. Let's go carefully. Most of what we call experience is repetition. This is not a criticism. It is simply the nature of a life lived through time. We encounter variations of what we have encountered before. We feel versions of what we have felt before. We move through seasons that rhyme with previous seasons, through relationships that echo previous relationships, through moments that carry the particular familiarity of a world that recycles its patterns across different casts of characters and different sets of circumstances. And in that repetition, there is comfort. There is the deep, stabilizing reassurance of a world that behaves predictably enough to be navigated, of emotions that, even when painful, are at least recognizable, of experiences that, however challenging, come with an internal map because you have been somewhere like this before and you found your way through, and the finding your way through taught you something that you carry still. But occasionally, not often, not predictably, not in any way that can be scheduled or prepared for or manufactured through any amount of effort or intention, something enters a life that does not rhyme with anything previous. Something that has no echo, no precedent, no internal map that can be unfolded and consulted, because nothing in the accumulated experience of an entire life has prepared the ground for exactly this. This is one of the rarest human experiences there is. And something about what is present in your life right now, in this specific and genuinely unusual stretch of time, seems to carry that quality. The quality of the unprecedented, of something that has no prior version to compare itself to. Let's be honest about what once in a lifetime actually means, because the phrase gets used loosely. It gets applied to experiences that are exceptional, that are memorable, that rise above the ordinary in meaningful ways, but that are not truly and literally singular. That could, in a different set of circumstances, happen again, that belong to a category of experience that, while rare, has a category, has others of its kind somewhere in the world, in other lives, in other moments. Oof. But there is another tier, a smaller, quieter, almost secret tier of experience that is genuinely irreducible to category, that exists only once in this specific form with these specific elements between these specific people at this specific convergence of timing and readiness and the particular accumulation of everything that brought two people to this exact point in their lives and not any other. This tier is not about grand external events. It is not about locations or occasions or the size of the gesture. It is about interior alchemy. The specific, unrepeatable chemistry that occurs when two people who have each been shaped by everything they have survived and learned and become arrive at the same moment, at a readiness for each other that neither of them could have reached any earlier. That required precisely the journey that preceded it, with all its difficulty and all its duration. What seems to be forming around you belongs to that tier, not to the category of beautiful but repeatable, to the smaller, quieter, genuinely singular category of something that could only happen now, that could only happen between these people, that could only emerge from this specific, unrepeatable confluence of who you are at this exact point in your becoming and who they are at this exact point in theirs. There is a phenomenon that people who have experienced this describe in remarkably similar ways, regardless of culture or language or circumstance. They describe a feeling of recognition that precedes understanding. Not the recognition of having met someone before, not the recognition of a familiar type or a familiar pattern or a familiar emotional dynamic, but something stranger and deeper than that. The recognition of something essential, of something that the most interior part of them, the part that exists below personality, below preference, below the entire constructed identity they have assembled over the years, responds to with a kind of knowing that bypasses the analytical mind entirely. It arrives before the mind has had time to process it, before the evaluation has been completed, before the person has gathered enough information to make any kind of reasonable assessment. The knowing is simply there, uninvited and undeniable, like a tuning fork that responds to a particular frequency it was made to respond to, not because it decided to, but because it was built that way. You may have felt something like this already, in a moment you perhaps did not fully trust, in an instance of recognition that you perhaps filed away under coincidence or projection or the unreliable nature of first impressions, something that seemed too immediate to be credible, too certain to be safe. But credible and safe are not always the criteria by which the most significant things arrive. Sometimes the most true things arrive most quickly. Sometimes certainty comes before the evidence that would justify it, not because the certainty is false, but because some part of us knows things through channels that move faster than rational processing. Let's talk about why this kind of experience is as rare as it is. Uh, it requires a specific alignment that almost never occurs. And I mean this in the most practical, most human, most unromantic sense possible, because understanding the rarity requires understanding all the ways it almost didn't happen. All the conditions that had to be exactly as they were for this particular convergence to be possible. First, it requires two people who have done enough of their own interior work to be capable of genuine meeting. Not perfect people, not healed people in the sense of having resolved everything and arrived at some final completed state, but people who have been willing, however imperfectly, however reluctantly, to look at themselves honestly, to sit with what is difficult in their own histories, to develop through whatever combination of experience and reflection and the slow work of growing up, enough self knowledge to be present with another person without completely losing themselves in the encounter. That alone is rarer than it sounds. Most people, most genuinely good, genuinely warm, genuinely well intentioned people have not done enough of that work to be truly available for this kind of connection. They are available for connection that is pleasant, connection that is comfortable, connection that asks of them what they already know how to give. But the deeper meeting, the one that requires you to be seen in the places you have most carefully hidden, requires a specific kind of readiness that develops slowly through difficulty and cannot be rushed. Second, it requires timing, not the mystical timing of fate, but the very practical timing of two people arriving at their readiness at the same time, which is when you consider how asynchronously human lives develop, how rarely lives run at the same pace, how often one person arrives at readiness years before or after another, genuinely unusual. The number of connections that could have been this but weren't, simply because the timing was off, simply because one person was ready before the other or after the other, is staggering. That both of these conditions seem to be met, that both of you seem to be at a point of readiness that is genuinely concurrent, is part of what makes what is forming so unusual. So, specifically and precisely once in a lifetime, there is something I want to say about the moon in all of this. Not in any prescriptive sense, not as a force that is doing something to you from the outside, but as a metaphor, as a way of describing something about the quality of what is present. The moon does not generate its own light. It receives light from a source so much larger than itself and reflects it back into the darkness. It does not try to be the sun. It does not attempt to produce what it cannot produce. It simply receives, and in receiving becomes capable of illuminating things that would otherwise be invisible, of making navigable a darkness that without it would be absolute. There is something in the dynamic between you and this person that carries that quality, a capacity for each other's light, a way in which each of you, in the presence of the other, becomes more visible to yourself, more legible, more honest, more capable of seeing what you actually are rather than what you have learned to perform. This is one of the most valuable things one person can offer another, and it is not something that can be consciously decided into existence. Either it is there or it is not. Either something in the encounter produces that particular quality of mutual illumination, or it doesn't. In what seems to be forming between you, it appears to be there. Now let's sit with what this means practically for your actual life, your actual days, your actual experience of moving through this period. It means that what is arriving or deepening or finally surfacing after a long time below deserves a quality of presence that ordinary experience does not require. It deserves the version of you that is not managing, not performing, not strategically presenting yourself in the way most likely to produce the outcome you want. It deserves the version of you that is simply, completely without reservation here. This will feel vulnerable. It may feel more vulnerable than almost anything you have done before. Because the deeper the potential of something, the more there is to lose in the losing of it. The higher the stakes of genuine meeting, the more terrifying the exposure required to make that meeting possible. The more once in a lifetime the experience, the more it demands of you in the way of presence and honesty and the willingness to be seen without the usual protections. And yet, and this is the thing, worth holding on to, the version of you that shows up without protections is also the version of you that is most capable of receiving what this is. The armor that protects you from being hurt also prevents the very connection it is supposedly protecting your capacity for. You cannot have both the protection and the depth. You have to choose. And in this particular moment, with this particular person, at this particular once in a lifetime convergence, the depth seems worth the choosing. Let me tell you something about the green growing things in the imagery around this reading, because there is something about the quality of growth that belongs here that keeps appearing at the edges of this, and it feels important to name. Living things do not grow toward comfort, they grow toward light. They extend themselves in the direction of what they need, not in the direction of safety, not in the direction of what is already known and proven and reliable, but toward the source of what will allow them to continue becoming what they are. There is something in what is forming between you that is asking for that quality of growth. That is asking you to extend yourself toward what is alive and real and genuinely nourishing, even when the direction of the reaching feels uncertain. Even when the light source you are reaching toward has not yet been fully confirmed as what you believe it to be, even when the growing itself requires moving into territory that has no previous version in your experience. Growth of this kind cannot be forced, but it can be allowed. And allowing it, creating the conditions in which it can happen naturally, in its own time, in its own direction, without trying to control the form it takes before it has finished taking form, is perhaps the most important thing you can do right now. Here is what I want you to understand about the once in a lifetime nature of what is forming. It does not come with a guarantee. Nothing real ever does. The value of something rare is not that it is certain, it is that it is genuine. That it belongs to the category of experience that cannot be manufactured or simulated or approximated by anything that does not carry the same specific, irreducible, completely particular quality of the real thing. You can have many pleasant connections in a lifetime. You can experience warmth and attraction and compatibility and genuine affection with multiple people across the span of a life. All of those things are real and valuable and not to be dismissed. But the specific quality of what seems to be present here, the depth of recognition, the unchosen certainty, the way the most interior part of you responds to this person before the analytical mind has had the chance to form an opinion, that quality does not recur on demand. It does not appear again simply because you want it to. It emerges when it emerges from conditions that cannot be replicated, and it asks only one thing of you in return: to not miss it, to not be so absorbed in the noise of daily life, or the protection of the armor you have built, or the reasonable caution of someone who has been disappointed before, that you fail to recognize what is standing in front of you for exactly what it is. The moon is out, Virgo. The green is growing. Something that has never happened before in your life, not in quite this form, not with quite this quality, not at quite this depth, seems to be present quietly, without announcement, in the specific way that the most significant things tend to arrive, not heralded, not dramatic, but unmistakable to anyone who is paying the right kind of attention. Pay that attention. Not anxiously, not the frantic, grasping attention of someone afraid of losing something before they have fully found it, but the steady, open, genuinely curious attention of someone who understands that they are in the presence of something worth attending to, something worth slowing down for, something worth bringing all of themselves to, without reservation, without performance, without the usual careful management of how much to show. Because what is once in a lifetime does not wait forever. It has a window wide enough to walk through, but not open indefinitely, and the walking through it requires only one thing from you: the willingness to recognize it for what it is. And then simply, quietly, with your whole self to show up for it. You are ready for this, Virgo. You have been ready for longer than you know. This is your moment. Let it be.